Hello, everybody. This is the Minnaségit podcast, and we are here on the 2025 edition of the World Adaptation Forum Conference, subtitled Beyond Mitigation. I have the pleasure to sit here with Raphaël Stevens. Hi, Raphaël.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. I'll give you a short introduction. I'll do my best. So, you're an eco-advisor and a fellow researcher at the Momentum Institute. Raphaël is a Belgian researcher exploring societal collapse and pathways to renewal at the Momentum Institute in Paris. He is the author of several books, including the international bestseller How Everything Can Collapse, where the term collapsology was first introduced. Has degrees in Eco-Counselling and an MSc in Holistic Science from the Schumacher College. He bridges theory and practice through public lectures, workshops, and socio-ecological activism. Wow. That's very impressive. I'd like to go with a very simple yet impossible to answer question. If you would have to choose one thing, what would you say, what is the biggest challenge at this point of time for human civilization?
I think the biggest challenge now is to make peace amongst ourselves and peace with other beings. So with the animals, with the vegetable world, and we need to make a real peace, because now it seems that humanity as a whole, maybe not everybody, but the majority of people are at war with nature, and so we need really to make peace with nature and let nature thrive as much as possible. So I believe it's the main challenge of our time.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think? What is holding humanity back from making peace? Why can't we make peace?
Because modernity came. Modernity is the modern world as we know it, starting in the 19th century. Some say just before that, but let's say that with the steam machine, we invented power and energy that gives our power to transform the planet. And I think, yes, we must pay attention to that. Modernity came with a lot of things, and we became materialistic, thinking that consumption and material things will save us from anything. That, I think, it's one of the main problem of our generation.
Mm-hmm. I'm grateful for you for saying this. I also read here holistic science.
Yes.
So I don't even know why I'm surprised that you're mentioning the problem, which is partly materialism. Do you think if we as a species would spend more time and effort to study consciousness and the possible levels of life, which are maybe not yet possible to measure with our current technology, do you think we could make up a little bit for our lack in spiritual evolution compared to technological evolution? Because we have so good machines and artificial intelligence, but we don't really know what consciousness is.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think it would be important to improve in that?
I'm not sure it's the answer of everything. I believe, having do this holistic science at the Schumacher College in Plymouth University, in fact. I have learned that, since the scientific revolution, we in fact developed one leg of our knowledge, which is reason, the Cartesian thoughts, so the intellectual mind, but we left in the middle intuition side of everything. So I think we now, in fact, the thing is that even reason, even the Cartesian thoughts, believes that is sure that in fact intuition is another cognitive mode that we all have, but we didn't learn how to use it properly. And that's a big problem, because we now are in one leg, but to walk, we need two legs, right? And so I believe that now we need to develop intuition, but collectively. It's not about just doing it individually, which is good already, but we need to develop it collectively, find ways to develop this side of our mind, right? We have two sides of our mind. One is the reason, the intellectual mind, and the other is this intuition. And maybe with the intuition, complementary with the reason, right? It's not about letting the reason on one side and just doing intuition. No, it's both. We need to have both, right? And with that, maybe we find what is real consciousness, right? And so I believe there is a big work to do to develop this collectively, the intuition side of our mind, right?
And what do you think? How could that possibly happen? What does a single person have to do to develop his or her intuitions to a better level? And how can you do that at all on a community level?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'm working on it. And starting individually is the first step, obviously, but then it's the question of politics, right? So how can we influence our institutions, or parliaments, or executive power, or judiciary power, everything, to make it happen collectively? It means that we have to rethink how we educate, how we transmit our knowledge, and how what we make with this knowledge, right? And so we have to develop it collectively and ask for it in a democratic way as much as possible, right?
As much as possible.
As much as possible, because I know, obviously, with the collapse, that will be the difficulty, in fact. With the collapse, we know that the authoritarian or the dictatorships thrive in a collapsing society, obviously. And then to make that happen, we have to be in the counter-currents, right? And that makes the thing difficult, but I don't believe it's impossible. I believe it's possible. We have to start to speak to each other during every day. You know, the main topic when you sit on the table with your family to eat, you have to speak about difficult things, and we have to speak about not only that, obviously, but it's a subject that we need to put on the table.
I agree, man, and I've tried this, and since then I'm eating alone.
Yes, that's one of the difficulties. In fact, when we've seen that a lot. When we try to convince people, they retract, they go back with force, so often with anger, often. And then that's a very difficult topic to elaborate on. And so we need to be ready, in fact, when they ask questions, and then we can provide some of the answers, some of our own answers to the questions. But we have to be ready for that. So there is no time to lose. We need to deep dive into it as quickly as possible. Right, and be ready when people ask, because they heard in the society, you know, things are not going well. Obviously, everybody knows that, but they are still blocked in a way that they don't ask questions. But some of them, more and more people are coming and asking questions. And then, if you are ready for answering some question with your own life, with your own pathway, and then you provide some of answer that might help.
Right. I think asking the good question is almost a prerequisite to getting a good answer. And
Exactly.
it reminds me on this quote from Jung that where the fear is, lies the work. So I very much sympathize with the thing you said, that we have to talk about difficult things. But when we talk about collapse, usually we talk about it very negatively. Of course, we're afraid of it. It's a stress factor. It's like they're lying incomprehensible things beyond collapse. But maybe it would be useful to think about it not only as a devastation, but also as a chance. Because when you crush your brick castle, then you get a new opportunity to build something new. And I think education could be something that is like a soil for growing new things. But I have the experience that normal education doesn't really touch on these subjects. Do you think teachers should talk about it nonetheless in classes?
It depends what kind of teacher. Is it for pupils, or is it for, it depends of people that need to be ready for talking about that, right? And I totally agree with you. There is one side which is one side of the collapse, which is suffering, which is pain and difficult times, but the other side is emancipatory for me. When things collapse, there is always opportunities, and I will talk tomorrow about that. The emancipatory side of collapse. In fact, we have many historical examples of society that went through a collapse of the hierarchies they had to face, but when the powers crumble, you have some mycelium,
Yes.
mycelium, and then with that you can weave something different, more horizontal, more where kinship emerge, where you can relate to each other, when you can have a real power and agency on it, right? The difficult thing is that because the power today it's too vertical, that is much unreachable for us. It seems too far away from us. So when collapse happen, you have this opportunity to rethink things and to reach out everybody, in fact, and make something different out of it. So
that's powerful thought.
But there is many historical examples. As I say, there is this Cahokia example, for instance, which is absolutely fantastic. Cahokia was the first North American city during the 12th century. And then it's growing from a village to a big city of 50,000 inhabitants in the space of 15 or 100 years, which is very short time for that period. And then it collapses because of this hierarchical paradigm they put, but people start very well to understand that they had opportunities when it crumbled. So that's one of the example I can cite. But there is also this example of Zomia in southeastern Asia. When empires of Chinese empires crumbled, people in the mountains could benefit, in fact, from that and try to be independent, new autonomy. So they gained this autonomy. Obviously, today, in fact, the problem is that we delegated our autonomy to technology, to the big institutions, right? And with the collapse, it's an opportunity to bring this knowledge or ways of being or ways of doing to ourselves, and that's fantastic. It opens up some new ways of thinking, new ways of doing, and will bring a lot of happiness as well. So I'm not dismissing that the collapse brings suffering, but it can also, the good side of it can also bring happiness. In fact, happiness of being able to bring back what has been in a way stolen.
Yeah.
Right? I know stolen is a big word, but it's I'm sure you can relate to that in a way.
Yeah, I think it's a good word to use. What are you expecting from this conference this year?
Well, expecting. I mean, I'm really happy to be here, to visit your country, to meet other people, to meet Hungarians as well. I'm deeply touched by the organization here, the numbers of people attending. It's quite fantastic. In fact, I couldn't believe it without seeing it. And when I will go back to my country and tell that to my friends, they will say, "Wow! I mean, even in Hungary, they're doing that. That's something big." So I'm sure, in every country now it's starting to grow. We have to believe, and we have to know that in fact the mushrooms is growing, and that's genius, and it gives warmth in our hearts, right? And that makes me good. So I'm very glad to be here.
And we are glad to have you here, man. Thanks so much for talking.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.